Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each of the episodes against each other. Today's episode is Criminal Minds Season 1, Episode 4, Plain Sight. Our episode in a nutshell is a brief summary of exactly what happens within this episode. The team profile an assaulter killer who glues his victim's eyes open. So after rewatching the episode, we'll now rank the episode on our two lists. A reminder that our two lists are a mostly objective ranking, which is absent emotion, and then the personal ranking, which is how I personally felt about the episode. So all emotion. All right, so as always, we start with our mostly objective rank values, and we will start with the positives. First positive is that we have some multi-season main character development with Reed, whom, for full disclosure and transparency, is my favorite character. That's where my heavy bias falls in this series, is toward Reed. Anything that happens with Reed will probably get mentioned. The others, I might miss something. Anyways, it was his birthday. They gave him trick candles, and it was very adorable. They threw a little party. He wore a funny hat, had cake before the events of the episode and the crime happened that distracted from his birthday. And then on the plane ride back, Gideon gives him a gift that he had forgotten to give him before, which ends up being football tickets. And the reason that he decided to give these football tickets is because it was kind of implied throughout the episode that Spencer has a crush on JJ, and she happens to be a football fan, which is why Gideon gave him the tickets so that Reed could then go to the game with her in what would essentially be a date. Now, that was worth 4 points. And then the second positive, I was a bit conflicted on whether this counted or not. Ultimately, I decided to count it. But again, I was conflicted about it. So obviously, we've mentioned that Spencer seems to have a crush on JJ. In this episode, she's the only one who calls him Spence. That's noted. And, throughout the episode, people are kind of making fun of him for why he can't get a date. He goes to Elle at one point in the episode, asking if it's because he knows 1600s ballads that he can't get a date. And then Elle asks him, well, have you ever asked anybody out? And then he says no. And then she said, well, that's why you can't get a date. And then obviously Gideon gives him the ticket so that he can ask out JJ to go to this game in a VIP box. It's a football team. I myself am not a sports fan, so I don't know if they're a good team or not. But either way, it is implied that, he has a crush on her, and then he's asked her to this game at the end of the episode, implication that they are going to go, whether that's as friends or a date. It's not really said because we don't really hear anything about this crush again in the upcoming episodes, to my recollection, and we know that JJ does have a different end game than Spencer, so it's not actually going to be going anywhere, spoiler alert. But even like in the next episode, based on my recollection of the series as a rewatcher, I do not think that it goes on at all or is even mentioned or brought up really again as far as his crush on her or wanting to be more than friends, etc., etc. So that's why I was conflicted. I'm like, I know it doesn't go anywhere. I know it's not really brought up again. But because it is in this episode, brief as it is, I decided to include it. And that's worth +2, which brings us up to 6. And then we have our only negative, which is, as mentioned with this series, because we have a villain of the week, we have a scale of memorable, semi-memorable, and then unmemorable. Memorable, of course, is a very standout, sticks in your mind even years later. If you're thinking on the series, these are the episodes that come to mind. Unmemorable is, of course, it didn't stick at all, and even when you're rewatching, you're like, this is the first time I've seen this, even though you know it isn't. And then semi-memorable is that in-between spot where it's not something that comes to mind off the top of your head, but once the episode starts playing, the light bulb goes off and you're like, yes, I do recall this one. This one did happen. Obviously, because it doesn't have staying power, it's not a positive, but also it's better than being unmemorable, which is why instead of a -4, it's a -2. And that brings us back down to 4 out of 10 for the objective ranking of this episode. Which brings us to our season 1 rankings so far on our mostly objective ranking. And in first place, we have Extreme Aggressor, Compulsion. This episode is in third with Plain Sight. And then worst episode so far, Won't Get Fooled Again. All right, so for the personal ranking, I agree with the objective rankings. Obviously, it was a semi-memorable episode, meaning that it did stand out. It did have some staying power as compared to previous episodes, but also wasn't amazing, stick in your mind, memorable. Basically, our killer in this episode is Franklin, and he works on telephone poles. And from these telephone poles, he looks into the windows, surprisingly, bedroom windows. It's a bit odd that a lot of these houses have the master bedroom facing the street. I would think it would be more common for them to face like the back of the house where there's like a little bit more privacy. That would be what I would look for in a house, but apparently most of these houses master bedroom faces the street. He's on the pole, looks into the master bedroom, learns the routines of these houses of upper middle class women, and he then, when he knows that they will be alone, makes his way into the house, assaults them, glues their eyeballs open, leaves poems, death's part of a poem between a noble lady and death, somewhere on the walls, on a mirror, etc., destroys the symbols of their wealth, and gets away with it because he blends in, because he is just a phone worker. People don't really pay attention to them, and then obviously this is what the team has to figure out throughout the episode. We get that his profile essentially is that he wants to be seen, and we also get kind of like a false start as well, where while they're looking for him, another woman is attacked. However, in this case, it is by a teenage grocery deliverer, or rather, not teenage, young adult grocery delivery person who tries to assault her. Husband comes home and interrupts because he obviously wasn't following the schedule, had a ski mask. They manage to track him down. They then basically bait Franklin by claiming him to be the Tommy killer, which is what they are calling this killer due to the poems and the gluing of the eyes wide open. And then this, of course, enrages Franklin. He then calls in. Garcia is not able to track him because he routed it through the phone system, which he has access to, which, of course, then is what puts them on the trail, or rather confirms their theory that he is a telephone pole worker person who does work in these neighborhoods. They then go to the business of the telephone company, find out where Franklin is, and then search that neighborhood. Gideon, while he's searching, hears a baby crying, goes around the back, notices that a baby is basically being abandoned, sees the tool belt on the counter, realizes this is the house that's currently being attacked. He calls it into Hotch, who then is able to come up, and then Gideon goes into the room where the woman is tied up, but thankfully still alive at this point. And basically, at first, Franklin is aiming a gun at her, offering to shoot her. Offering, sorry, that was a wrong word. Threatening to shoot her. And then Gideon basically says, if you shoot her, you've got nothing left. In fact, I'll make sure that nobody ever knows your name, that you will fade into obscurity, that you will be attacked by, you will be considered a random attacker or a copycat. I'll make sure that you get forgotten. However, if you give yourself up here, I'm going to make sure that everybody knows who you are, that the media says your name, that you get the credit for all of your murders. And Franklin is so pleased by this and happy that he's going to get to be remembered because that's what was important to him all along, is getting seen, that he puts the gun down, puts his hands up, and then Hotch arrives behind him and they arrest him. And then they, of course, untie the woman whose first concern, of course, is her child, who has been screaming this entire time, having been abandoned in his high chair, unintentionally, of course. And so they, of course, assure her that the baby's fine. She thanks them. And then that is when this whole crime scene ends. Obviously not, like I said, it didn't have like the sticking power of a truly memorable scene, even as any crime of this nature is heinous, but as compared to some of the other crimes that we see within this particular series, wasn't the worst that has ever happened in this particular series. All crimes are bad, but in this series, not the worst that we've seen. And like I said, like it's semi-memorable. As soon as it starts, you're like, ah, yes, I remember now. But not one that comes up off the top of your head. I personally, so in every show, there is always that one character that kind of you have a strong liking for. They're a character that just like every time they're on screen, you feel a little bit happier. You follow their story a little bit more closely, maybe, than some of the others. It just becomes a very strong character. For me, that is Reed. And I don't particularly like how everybody makes fun of him saying he couldn't get a date, because I'm like, to me at least, that's the character that has the best chance of getting a date, because that is where my bias goes. So I kind of felt like I just really enjoyed the Reed side of the episode because it was Reed heavy. It was his birthday. They were talking about him and dating, which not as fond of. I feel like Reed as a character just shouldn't. Like, I would not be disappointed if he went the entire series without any serious love interest. I can't remember off the top of my head if he gets love interests or not. I know he gets some like one-offs, but I don't know if they ever gave him like a steady love interest. But I almost feel like I would feel like that didn't suit the character. Not because I don't think people who are incredibly intelligent shouldn't have love or anything like that, but just I feel like this character reads to me more as not a heavy in the dating scene type of person. Like, I imagine him reading his books and doing his own research and getting more degrees and things like that rather than focusing on a romantic aspect. So the fact that he's like the first character to actually kind of explore that more dating side, not as fond of it, but I do like that it is JJ who is like his really close friend. Obviously, we know that it doesn't actually go anywhere. And it does kind of establish for the series that Reed is not somebody who does date often, hence why they are all joking about how he can't get a date, and he keeps wondering why it is that he doesn't get dates and stuff. But I could have gone without that side quest in this episode. And I feel like it's weird that they brought in like the asking JJ out to a game when we know that that doesn't go anywhere and they weren't planning to follow it through. So why even add that aspect in the first place? Anyways, not something that I was particularly fond of for that side quest. Um, so overall, a good episode, not great. And that is why I decided to rank it as 6 out of 10. Which brings my season 1 rankings so far on the personal side to, in first place, Compulsion. Second is this episode, which is Plain Sight. extreme aggressor, and then my least favorite, won't get fooled again. So that now brings us to our final segment in this series ranking so far. And this is where we are going to be ranking each of the seasons against each other based on a total percentage score, which is found by adding up the scores from each episode. 22 episodes in the series means total maximum score of 220 can be achieved. And so on the mostly objective ranking, we are adding 4, which brings us up to 22. And then on the personal ranking side, we are adding 6, which brings us up to 20 out of 220. Hit 22 out of 220 and 20 out of 220. And with that, we've now rewatched and ranked Criminal Minds, Season 1, Episode 4, Plain Sight. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.